Welcome to the Football Game Plan College Football Tailgate Show, presented by Football Game Plan. I am David Hashagen. I'm joined as always by the czar of the playbook, Emery Hunt. Week 8 saw a massive shakeup in the top 10s all across the football world. Let's get into some of the news and notes to start with. Alabama continues to roll across D1, but they're going to have to do it without their starting quarterback. How does Tua Tagovailoa's injury affect the Tide, Emery? He's been the key for them this year. He's a Heisman favorite for some people. Now they don't have him for a couple of weeks, but at least it's before LSU.
Well, here's the thing. If we thought it was going to affect them in a negative way, we would have saw it against Tennessee, because Tennessee had a chance in that ball game. There was some momentum that was building toward the Volunteers, and we saw Alabama take control. Now, whatever quarterback is going to get the start, he's going to have the full complement of those tremendous receivers, those three receivers, the best receivers in college football history, like we talked about on this show before. But there's a great chance for the quarterback to step in, have success. Tua is a big piece of what they do. It won't look the same. They probably won't score 60 points a game like they do with him back there at QB. However, they will be able to still be productive. They will be able to still win. He had this injury before on the opposite ankle, and so we've seen him come back from that and play well. How well will he play next time they get out there on the field with him, maybe November 9th against LSU? That's going to be tough for him, because they're going to need him to be 100% in a big game against a conference opponent who is arguably, I think, the number one team in the nation. So we'll see.
And we'll talk about Alabama later on here in the show. Let's move on to our next news and notes, though. A massive upset last week as Wisconsin 30-point favorites lose to Lovie Smith and the Fighting Illini of Illinois. They have dropped big time in the polls. Another team that's dropping, though, slowly but surely, is Clemson, despite the fact that they're undefeated. Question is, who needs a win more this week, Clemson or Wisconsin?
That's a good point, because when you think about Wisconsin, they had themselves positioned perfectly to make a run into the Big Ten title game and perhaps get into the playoffs. Now, those options are still on the table for Wisconsin, because they still have to play the teams at the top of their division within the Big Ten. So they can still absorb this loss to Illinois and that glorious beard of Lovie Smith and still get back on track to win, to get in position to get into the playoffs. It hurts the Big Ten, but the Big Ten still has Ohio State. Now, if they beat Ohio State, then that's great. They can still get their way in with one loss. But Clemson, because of how they're winning and because of the emergence of LSU, Alabama, and now maybe a Big 12 team, Oklahoma, you have to worry about Clemson perhaps being out of the conversation, because if you have Ohio State, Oklahoma, LSU, Alabama, Clemson is on the outside looking in. And we're not talking about, a team that has dominated the competition in the ACC. I think they're in more of a must-win mode than Wisconsin. They're in a must-win by a bunch of points type situation than what we've seen from the Badgers.
And Lovie Smith, the best beard in all of college football.
I don't know, man. Stump Mitchell's beard for the Cleveland Browns is pretty awesome, too.
So we got the pro and the college version there. One last news to talk about. College game day obviously has been a tradition for a couple of decades now. They're heading to a brand new city this week. They're heading to Brookings, South Dakota for the first time in a top 5 game. North Dakota State travels to South Dakota State. What is the impact of that kind of game and this kind of experience on an FCS school and a smaller town in the Midwest?
Well, it's huge, because we talked about it on our FCS Opening Drive podcast, which you can find on iTunes there, by the way. But we talked about it before, how they tend to stay within a certain region. It'll either be North Dakota or the Ivy Leagues or JMU. But they now go to Brookings, South Dakota, which is going to be great, because South Dakota State has fantastic facilities. I know that rivalry is a big one within those two athletic departments, and the showing for the fans is going to be huge. So it puts the FCS firmly on the national map for a Saturday afternoon. It also helps out the program in getting more exposure. We've seen guys go from the FCS to the NFL, especially from this program. You talk about Adam Vinatieri, the kicker from the Indianapolis Colts, a Hall of Famer. You talk about Dallas Goedert, who plays for the Philadelphia Eagles, along with Taron Christian, who just got drafted in the XFL. Yep. And North Dakota State's quarterback is Dallas Goedert, quarterback in Carson Wentz. So you have a ton of intrigue in this ball game. So I'm happy it has made its way back to an FCS campus. Even happier for the people out there at South Dakota State.
Big game in the Dakota Marker game. Last time North Dakota State lost was to South Dakota State away. So we'll see how that one goes. Let's get into our game of the week, and it's a top 10 matchup. We have to preview this. We've talked about the LSU Tigers a lot. They're now number 2 in the country. They take on number 9 Auburn. There's a lot of hype around the quarterbacks in this one, but the defenses could be the deciding factor. Let's start with Auburn. What are the keys to victory for them to take down number 2?
First of all, Derek Brown, the defensive tackle, is one of the best defensive players, period, in the country. You could make a choice for a case for Chase Young out there at Ohio State, but Brown has done a fantastic job with Auburn. And it's because of that, I think they have to find ways to get quick pressure on Joe Burrow. You want to make him get rid of that football quickly. Take full advantage of your team in Auburn. That does a great job in making plays in space. Tackling in space is excellent for Auburn. Get quick pressure on Burrow, force him to get rid of the football quickly, and then you give yourself a shot. On the offensive side, what happened to Bo Nix, the freshman against Florida, was the turnovers. Now, he bounced back nicely and had back-to-back wins. They've done a great job since then. But in another big game, he can't turn the ball over. He has to protect the football. Ball security is going to be key because we know the Tigers will be hungry coming after him.
Let's talk about LSU. Joe Burrow obviously has gotten a lot of headlines. He's quickly moved up the Heisman favorite list for a lot of people. This LSU offense has been clicking on all cylinders, and it starts with that passing game, which we haven't been accustomed to.
Well, the passing game is going to be key here, and that's one of the points I want to jump into is when you talk about LSU and their key to victory on offense, I think they have to get the backs involved in the passing game. Now, we know about their receivers. Jamar Chase is one of the best receivers in the country and has turned himself into an NFL prospect. We know Burrow, not only a Heisman candidate, but some people are talking about him potentially as the #1 overall pick. The backs in the running game, Clyde Edwards-Helaire is one of the best backs in the program and one of the best backs in the SEC. Getting these guys involved in the passing game, because you would expect Auburn to try to blitz these guys and get after them, get those backs out there on the outlet, take advantage of those guys in space, and hopefully could generate a big play. Now for defensive purposes for LSU, you look at the perimeter defense. Auburn has a ton of speed, not just regular SEC speed, but world-class speed on the perimeter. If you can't win defensively on the perimeter, you can struggle. They have to win there and force everything within that tackle-to-tackle box where I think they have an advantage.
Who do you think wins this ball game? Because there's a lot of hype around this one. There's a lot of questions of whether LSU is still legitimate from some people. Do they win this game against Auburn?
I think they do. This is a team that's highly focused on the task at hand, which is the team that's right in front of them. They're still trying to win with style points. They're doing a great job. They've moved up in the polls. I like LSU big in this ball game. I think defensively, they're right there with Auburn. Offensively, the senior experience by Joe Burrow and the chemistry that he has with those receivers and their ability to run the football, even when it's not there, they stick with it. In addition to their dynamic passing game, I like LSU to roll against Auburn and avoid the upset.
A blowout possibly for the Tigers. When we return, we'll preview some of the big FBS matchups coming up this week in Week 8, including some big matchups in the Big Ten. We'll have that when we come back on the College Football Tailgate Show, presented by Football Game Plan. Stay with us.
Be sure to order your copy of the Go-Go Offense by Coach Brennan Marion on footballgameplan.com/GoGoOffense. Coach Marion goes through the ins and outs of his explosive offense, one that's tearing up the college football field and putting a lot of points on the scoreboard. Again, you can order your copy at footballgameplan.com/GoGoOffense.
Welcome back to the College Football Tailgate Show here on the Game Plus Network. David Hassagen here with Emery Hunt, the star of the playbook. Now it's time to break down some of the big matchups from the FBS. Let's start with one of the teams we mentioned earlier, Wisconsin. They were certainly not jumping around last week when they lost to Illinois, a devastating loss. They may have been looking ahead to this week against Ohio State. How do the Badgers bounce back against the Buckeyes?
They have to get back to basics. And what Wisconsin does well is that they run the football, they play great defense, and their passing game has usually been a compliment. Now, we hadn't talked a lot about their passing game this year. Usually we were talking about their passing game because it's been ineffective. Their passing game has actually been solid. It wasn't last week against Illinois, which is why they lost that ball game. So they have to get back to basics. Ohio State has to continue to be a dominant team. We've seen this team handle adversity against Michigan State. We've seen them come out and just dominate every other opponent since then. So Ohio State's ability to dominate is going to be key. I do like them to win this ball game. This was the game that Wisconsin was building up for, to maybe upset Ohio State to be firmly in the playoff mix, but I think this is a situation where one loss becomes two.
Wisconsin comes up short yet again. Let's move now to the Mountain West. A huge game between Nevada and Wyoming. Boise State has moved down in the Mountain West. It's provided an opportunity for these teams to move on up. Who should we look for in this game in terms of pro prospects and to take advantage of Boise State going downhill?
Well, there's always going to be pro prospects, but one name in particular that I like is a guy that has a unique story. Is Malik Henry for Nevada. He was on Last Chance U, got kicked out of community college, and found his way to the Nevada Wolfpack program and has played great football. Has been exactly what that program has needed at that position and has helped springboard this program forward into now they're in a conversation for playing potentially for Mountain West Conference title. Wyoming has great defense. They do a great job in attacking the ball. They do a great job in turning the ball over. I still like Wyoming in this ball game because of their defense. Malik Henry is a great story, but I think defensively Wyoming and the Cowboys and how they pressure and turn the ball over will be the key.
Let's move now to Appalachia, a big game, not just for recruiting, but also in Conference USA. Western Kentucky taking on Marshall. The Thundering Herd have always been a powerhouse. Western Kentucky had a loss to an FCS program earlier this year. Conference USA, though, is still a very fluid situation in that conference.
Yeah, Western Kentucky has turned it around quietly. They've become one of the premier teams now in that conference. Marshall got a big win last week against Florida Atlantic. A great defensive win. I know Doc Holliday very well, does a great job in coaching up his Thundering Herd. He gets a lot of kids from Florida to come up to Huntington, West Virginia, and do a great job in just developing talent up there. I like them in this game to win. When you talk about the defense, that has been the biggest issue for Marshall, not because of how they play, because they kept shooting themselves in the foot. Personal fouls, offsides, pass interference. They cleaned up the mistakes. Their offense plays good complementary football. They can run the ball. They got a good offensive line, but defensively they stopped shooting themselves in the foot. They take care of business against the Hilltoppers.
Let's move back now to the SEC. Alabama taking on Arkansas. We mentioned no Tua for Alabama, so can the Razorbacks take advantage of a Alabama team that's subpar?
No, you said subpar. Alabama is still the Alabama Crimson Tide, and they're going to beat the stuffing out of the Razorbacks in this ball game. And not, to put it lightly, they will win against Arkansas. But Arkansas, yeah, if you're going to have an opportunity to upset Alabama, it'll have to come early, and it'll have to come late. So you have to start the game with a blast, and you have to finish with a flurry. You can't allow the game to go back and forth in between because you don't want to play that physical tug-of-war game with Alabama. You have to start out fast and finish fast. If they can't do either of those two things, they're going to lose, which I think they will do.
And we'll see who potentially the next starting quarterback for the University of Alabama will be, who is Tua's backup, and who may take over next season. So that'll be interesting to watch in that one. Next up, Notre Dame taking on Michigan. Wolverines, they lose again to Penn State. The leash keeps getting shorter and shorter for Coach Harbaugh, and this is a game that most Michigan alums expect to win. The Fighting Irish coming in next. Critical game for Michigan if they want any chance of being in a big bowl game this season.
This used to be the ABC special, the spotlight game of the week. Middle of the day, Notre Dame, Michigan, a lot of history here. And I'm not going to fault Coach Harbaugh for the loss last week against Penn State. That kid should have caught that football. They hit him in the chest and then in the stomach and then hit the ground in the end zone. So they were in position to win that game. I thought they did a great job on both sides of the ball. I actually like them against Notre Dame. I like Notre Dame's defense. I do like how Ian Book operates their offense. But Michigan, with Charbonnet, the running back, continue to feed him the football. He reminds me a lot of Robert Smith that played for Ohio State and played for the Minnesota Vikings. I love the running game. I think defensively they'll give Notre Dame problems. Here's your upset of the week, Michigan over Notre Dame.
And a lot of questions about Notre Dame have been posed by a lot of people. This will be the acid test for them out of the Big Ten. Let's move back to the Mountain West now. Utah State taking on Air Force. Both teams that have been severely underrated this season. Air Force is coming off a nice momentum. Utah State up at the top again. This is another huge game in the Mountain West.
Well, Utah State has the pro prospect in Jordan Love, the quarterback. Everyone is wanting him to have that breakout wow game. He's been playing good football. He had an inconsistent day against LSU outside of some tremendous throws. But here's an opportunity to face a very good defense in Air Force and get a good statement win for the program. Air Force quietly has been outstanding on both sides of the ball. Defensively, I like what I'm seeing from the Falcons. Their passing game within their flex bone option is dangerous, so they're able to hit big plays deep down the field in addition to keeping you honest because of their option attack. I do like Air Force in this ball game. Utah State has shown some stuff up front that yields itself to where Air Force should have a big day running the football, not because of their option, because of what I've seen defensively from Utah State. Gap sound defense is not there right now, and that could be a problem against Air Force.
Air Force might be the best military academy right now in Division I. Army and Navy, both semi-struggling so far. One last game to talk about out west, and it's in the Pac-12. Cal taking on Utah. Utah might be the best chance the Pac-12 has now. We keep saying this over and over about 5 different schools in the Pac-12 of who the playoff team could be. Utah might be it. They need to avoid the trap game against Cal.
Well, Cal has the defense to pull off this upset, but offensively, without their starting quarterback and without any level of consistency on that side of the ball, it could be an issue to score points against a defense that mirrors a lot of what we see them do from a front seven perspective. Utah is aggressive. They can get pressure without blitzing, and when they blitz, they tend to get home. On offense, they have a good combination. Huntley, the quarterback, that does a great job, and also you look at Zach Moss, the running back. So they got a good quarterback-running back combination. Huntley is completing nearly 75% of his passes. No one's talking about him coming out of the Pac-12 as a legit pro prospect at the position. He has that team playing great football. You're right. Last chance for the Pac-12 to get a playoff team in. I think Utah avoids the upset, take care of business. Kyle Whittingham is one of the best coaches, bar none, in college football. Has done a phenomenal job out there at Utah during his tenure.
After the break, we'll go through some of the big matchups from across all divisions on the College Football Tailgate Show here on the Game Plus Network. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Football Game Plan College Football Tailgate Show. Let's now move into the lower divisions, and let's start with a matchup from the FCS and a game out of the MEAC. Florida A&M is not playing like they're ineligible for the postseason. They knocked off number 10 North Carolina A&T last week. This week, they face Morgan State. Emory, you're going to be on the call for this game, so you cannot give a prediction, but what should we be watching in this game?
Morgan State's front line, their offensive line and their defensive front seven. Love the linebackers at Morgan State. They have the best linebacking core, in my opinion, in the MEAC. Rico Kennedy is leading the way, does a great job, and also applying pressure. On the offensive side, they do a great job of just moving guys off the spot. So their point of attack play is key. For FAMU, they're explosive. On offense and on defense, they turn the ball over. It's a big reason why they were able to upset A&T last weekend. They're 6-1 on the season. Their lone loss is against UCF in week 1. So this is a football team on a 6-game winning streak. They're playing with an attitude. They remind me a lot of that Auburn team in '94 that was ineligible for the national title and went undefeated. And they beat a Florida team that year that was really good. They won a lot of big games, won the Iron Bowl that year. So this team is on a mission, Florida A&M. So I'm excited to be on this call. It's ESPN3 at 3 p.m. Eastern time. So it's going to be a great game. I'd be interested to see what your thoughts on, considering how FAMU played last week.
I think FAMU wins this one big. I think Ryan Stanley's one of the most underrated quarterbacks in FCS. He's had a phenomenal season again. And FAMU, they've been really good at closing out games, getting late touchdowns, which they didn't do last year, losing their last 3 games in a row in tough fashion. But this one, they shouldn't have to have any problem coming back and winning this game. I think they win big against Morgan State. Let's move now to the Ivy League. Columbia taking on Dartmouth. Big Green looks like, for real, they might be the undefeated school out of the Ivy this year. Princeton was last season. Their offense is really hard to defend. Columbia's going to have their hands full.
They're definitely going to have their hands full because you mentioned this is a great defense. It's not a good defense. It's a great defense. And offensively, they're smothering because they can beat you up front, and they're now starting to incorporate big plays in the passing game. Their running game is what really, where they hang their hats and where they're going to make their money. But the passing game has been incorporated a little bit more. It's tough to defend. Usually this would be a trap game in my opinion, but I think Dartmouth is just that strong to knock off Columbia.
We move now to the Big Sky. Eastern Washington taking on Montana. Montana's coming off an upset loss to Sacramento State. They're trying to avoid the old make 1 loss into 2. Eastern Washington, though, they've had a rough year. They're looking to spoil the party for everyone in the Big Sky.
Tough to get a good read on the Eagles this year, just like it is for Jacksonville State. Teams that do a great job of when they win big. But when they lose, you're like, oh my God, what happened out there on the field? Montana is coming off that tough loss that you alluded to. And again, it's more of an indictment on, it's not an indictment on Montana and how they lost to Sacramento State, but more of, wow, Sacramento State is a really good football team. So I think Montana will avoid the upset and avoid the ineffectiveness coming from their football team that we saw last week. They'll knock off Eastern Washington and continue to move forward.
Eric Berrier, though, one of the better quarterbacks in FCS for Eastern Washington, just can't get any help from the defensive side of the ball. Let's move now to our next matchup in Division II. West Alabama taking on West Georgia. Both teams 4-3. Both teams looking to position themselves for the postseason, but West Alabama's got a pro prospect that we should keep an eye on.
Well, tight end Quay Boyd is the big guy, 6'5", 242. He's probably going to be in the East-West Shrine game or maybe NFLPA game or one of these other bowl games like Tropical Bowl, College Gridiron Showcase. But he's a pro prospect. He's on the radar. Hasn't had the receiving success because they're putting the ball out to the perimeter, but maybe this is the game where they look down the middle of the field, down the seam, and get him more involved because he's a big-time talent. He also is a very good blocker, which helps spearhead that running game. With all of that said, I do like West Georgia to win this ball game. The Wolves do a great job on defense. They have great special teams. I think West Georgia knocks off West Alabama.
Let's move now to our PSAC game of the week. East Stroudsburg taking on Westchester, two teams that are traditional powers in this conference. This is a critical game in this conference for deciding who potentially wins the whole thing.
Well, you look at the East Division versus the West Division. West is usually strong with Slippery Rock and IUP and Cal PA. And quietly, the East is a bit stronger this year with Stroudsburg having the success they've had, and Westchester can create some distance between them because of the loss last week to Bloomsburg from East Stroudsburg, and now Westchester can create a 2-game gap in this in the East Division. So I think Westchester will do that. I like what they do defensively, and on offense, they can run the football, and I like how they are consistently running the football. When you look at Westchester up front along the offensive line, you say to yourself, wow, that looks like a MAC school out there. And they dominate up front, and they do a great job and continue to own the line of scrimmage. I like the Rams.
Let's move now to Division III. Gettysburg College taking on Johns Hopkins. Gettysburg is winless. Johns Hopkins, they have a pro prospect this year, but it's not in lacrosse for the Blue Jays. It's at the quarterback position, and we've got a lot of scouts talking about this kid.
Yeah, scouts are talking about David Tomorrow, the quarterback, 6'3", 215 from Chantilly, Virginia. He talked about how great the high school football program is in that area, that Northern Virginia area. So a lot of scouts are going to be at this game checking him out. He's a very under-the-radar prospect, but he's spearheading this offense. And Johns Hopkins has done a fantastic job over the course of a decade. You know, rest in peace to Coach Margaret Hargret, who passed away over the summer. Shocking, death. He was a great coach, and they were able to pick up where they left off and continue this program. They used to develop point of attack players that would get an opportunity in the NFL. Now they got a quarterback. Gettysburg is winless. The Bullets haven't had the success this season on either side of the ball, and I think Johns Hopkins is looking deeper into the playoffs. They'll take care of business Friday night against the Bullets.
And one last game to talk about here from Division III. Salisbury taking on Kane University here in New Jersey. Our local game of the week. What should we be watching in this ball game?
The option attack of Salisbury, the Gulls, they do a great job of running that triple option. I've seen them before. I've been on the broadcast in their D3 ECAC bowl games at Franklin Field, and they put the clamps on a Carnegie Mellon squad that had a pro player in Sam Benger, the quarterback, and also on the receiving side of it as well. So they shut down their offense because their option game kept those guys off the field. Kane will have to be assignment sound, have to be disciplined, have to make sure to get key stops. Salisbury is one of the top teams in Division III. They win against Kane this weekend.
And we'll sort of keep an eye on that one. And if you're around Kane, I would suggest go and check out your local football team and support your local university. That will do it for the College Football Tailgate Show. Don't forget to go to footballgameplan.com and youtube.com/footballgameplan for the FCS Whip Around, and check out the FCS Opening Drive podcast on SoundCloud and iTunes for all your FCS news and notes every Monday. For Emery Hunt, I'm David Hassagen. Enjoy Week 9, and thanks for watching.